It can feel very hard if you bought the top at like 126K and now the Bitcoin price is at like 65 to 70K. But let me tell you one thing. We have the best possible setup for a huge Bitcoin move yet. I have never seen, since I'm in Bitcoin, such an amazing setup for a huge Bitcoin move. The last time that we had gold ripping, huge macro printing, and a low Bitcoin price was in 2020. Back in that day, we went within months from 9K to 64K. That's a 7x move. Today I talked with my guest Vijay about exactly this setup and why we are as bullish as we have ever been in Bitcoin. Enjoy. There's so many interesting topics currently floating around in the Bitcoin's ecosystem. I think the most topical one, the most that like I see constantly on my Twitter feed, is the absolute rush of gold. I remember end of the year, we covered like, wow, gold is breaking for the first time ever 4K. Now we broke like just like a couple of months later, 5K. Silver has gone up, I think even a little bit more than gold, if I saw the charts correctly. And then there's like we Bitcoiners, like we think like, oh, what the heck is going on? I thought like Bitcoin is the winning horse, like Bitcoin is the good one. What are your kind of like your thoughts on the gold silver price action and also in relationship to Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think the current period is very similar to price action from 2020, which was the last major bull run in gold and silver. If you remember, I think if you look at the charts, the period from May 2020 to around October 2020, gold and silver went absolutely, to the moon. And if you go back, if you look at tweets from the period, Bitcoin was flat, and you see people saying, "Oh, it's dead." Exactly the same kind of narratives that you're hearing now. I remember it very clearly because it's sort of there was this sentiment, or exactly the same sentiment. This should be Bitcoin's moment. Why is it going? Why is gold and silver going up? And then if you see what happened October, I think they all peaked. Gold and silver peaked, and then they were flat to down. And then November 2020 came along, and Bitcoin went from $9,000 or $10,000 straight up to $64,000 with a few mini crashes along the way. So that was November onwards. So I don't know if the exact same thing will play out again, but that is something that is worth studying and looking at for people who think that it's all over now. So and why that happens is anybody's guess, but I think it has something to do with when there's liquidity enters the system. I think it normally goes to assets that the market understands. And that is gold. The market understands gold, it understands silver, and then it moves further out on the spectrum into other assets which maybe are less understood or are considered more risk assets, right? So the unfortunate reality, I think we've talked about this on the last time we spoke, it's a very small percentage of people truly understand Bitcoin, right? And that I think is the biggest hurdle or stumbling block right now, is that people don't understand it. People think it is, think it's like a small cap stock, and they trade it like a small cap stock. So it takes time. It takes time for something as innovative and groundbreaking as Bitcoin to permeate the psyche of humanity. It's going to take a lot longer. I think we're still at less than 1% in terms of people who understand it. So it's a long way to go. But as that understanding grows, price action will also be reflected. So I think you just have to be patient. People who, just give up hope. So conviction doesn't come easy. You are constantly tested. And as you know, like Bitcoin always tests your conviction. So yeah, I mean, I think we will, time will tell. The coming months will tell. I think I'm still very bullish on the rest of 2026. just because of all the macro things, as well as the price action in gold and silver, which is very bullish. It's just, I think, there's a bit of a time lag.
Yeah, I think I think it shows an educational problem still in Bitcoin, where people still seem to place it with the speculative assets a little bit, where they say like, hey, it's like almost like a Tesla or something like that, is an tech innovation, and they place it less and less with gold. And I think this will change over time. But right now there's like fear in the system. Interest rates get lower than like the inflation runs still high, and then like gold is ripping because people are like fearful of the system, and also like a lot of institutional and central bank buying of gold, and then liquidity comes back in. Bitcoin is ripping. We've seen it in 2020, massive massive bull run. A lot of liquidity came in. I'm not sure if the same liquidity will come now in the system also, but I think a lot of liquidity will come also in 2020. Donald Trump will appoint someone in the Fed chair that will fulfill the dreams that he already wanted to have last year. So I think it's 2026 is poised to be a freaking awesome year for Bitcoin. Let's see what actually happens.
Yeah. I think gold is. I've always had this question, right? Like, if fiat has all these problems, right? Primarily, the biggest problem being scarcity, and gold is obviously, prior to Bitcoin, it was the scarcest money. Why has gold's market cap been so small, right? Historically, you would have thought, if you were just coming into this completely fresh, right, from another planet or something, and you see, okay, scarcity of money is the problem. The scarcity is the biggest problem. Money printing by central banks is the biggest problem. So you would expect that the world would have adopted the most scarce asset as a store of value, and gold should have a market cap of at least 100 or 200 trillion dollars, right? But it's not the case. And I struggle to explain that. Even now, I can't really explain that. Gold is tiny still compared to, if you think about the fact that everybody understands that it's scarce, right? It is the opposite of money printer go burr kind of thing. So why is it still kind of pretty tiny compared to other asset classes? It's hard to explain that. And so I would have thought that the better arc, the better adoption story would be gold replaces fiat, because the world realizes that fiat is abundant and it's abused, it's discretionary. So a scarce physical commodity that everybody understands becomes the money of the world. We revert to a gold standard, right? And then people say, oh, actually, gold has all these shortcomings, but digital gold has solved all those shortcomings. So why don't we move into digital gold, right? If you look at the properties of money, scarcity, divisibility, portability, verifiability, and then confiscatability, censorship resistance, and permissionlessness, and all of that. Gold is only good for one thing: it's scarcity. Everything else, and fungibility, everything else is kind of fail. It's really bad, right? So you would have thought that people would be on the gold standard, and then from the gold standard, they say, okay, here's a gold 2.0, and let's move to Bitcoin. That seems like the more, logical adoption path than going from fiat directly into Bitcoin, at least in my mind, if you're just creating a narrative, right? Otherwise, I'm not able to explain why the world didn't adopt gold earlier, when fiat was being printed to the moon, right? So maybe this is the path. Maybe this is the course that history will take. You move into gold. Gold just completely, is adopted. We actually literally move onto a gold standard. We move gold on a blockchain, tokenized gold. All of that takes over. Russia, India, all the BRICS, they settle on gold, tokenized gold, for the next few years, and then they start thinking, oh, but what if my gold is confiscated? Where is the vault, right? Here are those are the problems, and then censorship. Your transactions can be censored if you're a terrorist state. So a terrorist state, or a state that's not, in OFAC's good books, is censored by tokenized gold or in the gold markets. And then you decide to move into digital gold because it is censorship resistant, permissionless, and unconfiscatable. So yeah, I mean that's a potential avenue of adoption.
I find it also fascinating because if you think about, there has been gold and then people started using fiat because gold has shortcomings, like it's not as good divisible, like it's not as good transferable to other people. You cannot send it quickly to other countries and states, and so we made that fiat layer that in the beginning was connected to gold, and then at some point people like, hey, they accept this fiat paper without even having to redeem this gold. And so I think now I hope we're in the area where people wake up to the idea that we should never have ripped the connection between the paper and gold, but it's inevitable that someone will rip that connection up. So we need something that has the properties, the good properties of fiat, like it's divisible, you can send it across the planet, and has the properties of gold, like being scarce, being hard to make, and all of that. And I think that's just Bitcoin. The question now is, how long will it take for people to realize that? And I always tend to argue for it will probably take longer than we might like it. To the education process.
There's a simple answer to that question, which is I've said this many times, which is you don't appreciate the solution if you haven't experienced the problem. The solution is going to be meaningless to you if you don't understand the problem. So why do you care about unconfiscatable if you've never experienced confiscation of your wealth, confiscation of your money? You don't care. It doesn't matter to you, right? Why do you care about censorship resistance if you've never had a transaction censored in your life? Why do you care about permissionlessness? So people in Iran and Syria and North Korea and so on understand these problems, and Nigeria, they understand these problems, but unfortunately there isn't a lot of money there to move into Bitcoin and actually show up in the price action. Most of the money is in the developed world, in the Western world, where there isn't really, these problems aren't acutely experienced, right? So maybe that's what is needed. Maybe we need to be, and I do think we are on the precipice of some major, historic events on, various fronts. And so maybe we enter that era where Western societies as well experience some of these problems. And then adoption is just like that. You reach that tipping point, and then they once, like all of a sudden they understand the importance of all these properties. So that's the thing. But if you're just sitting there, in the comfort of your living room by a fireplace and, pontificating about, money and gold and sort of what's the point of censorship resistance? It's not relevant to you, right? And I think that's a big issue. That's a big stumbling block in the adoption path.
Will this then also lead to like the pure existence of Bitcoin being here and being viewed as an alternative? And we saw that with with the Davos meeting, that it's already in their eyes something like, oh, like it's private money and like it's public money. Do you think that the existence of Bitcoin will actually force the fiat currencies to do less confiscation, do less printing of money, to actually try to have a better currency, because they slowly get aware of the fact that if we start to confiscate like crazy and print like crazy, people have now an alternative where they can just like go?
Mhm. So I think it comes to Lynn Alden's "Nothing Stops This Train," right? The meme, which is it's no longer a choice; it's mathematical, right? You have to. There's the number of options that you have to self-correct is rapidly diminishing, right? And you look at $40 trillion national debt in the U.S. and as people have observed, if you take into account um, unfunded pension liabilities in the US, I think you're well in excess of $200 trillion in unfunded obligations. Um, and so these are not, you can't just suddenly choose to be prudent and, kind of prudence comes hand in hand with austerity. So you'd have to impose austerity upon the people, right? And austerity is not popular. You cannot, and that's why, again, it's not compatible with democracy. When you have a democratically elected government, it's like I think did we talk about Alexander Tytler, the Scottish historian? He says democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It only exists until the majority realizes that they can vote themselves largesse, as in excesses from the public purse. And then from that point on, the people always vote for the party promising them the most benefits, okay, until the system is bankrupted and collapses and is destroyed. So that's just how, if you want to stay in power, if you have a Democrat, you want to please the masses, you want to please the people, you have to inject liquidity. You have to, print. You have to, do all these things. And at some point, it takes on a life of its own. And so, yeah, nothing stops it. So I don't think you can suddenly become prudent. Yeah.
Is there, do you think that, or let's ask differently, what kind of system does Bitcoin incentivize? What kind of political system do you think we will end up with when Bitcoin becomes more dominant and the money printing is basically no longer really an option, or like only a very small option?
Yeah, I think we move into a world where the government just is a service provider rather than being this, all-powerful, omnipotent authority that can come into your house and put a gun to your head and take your belongings effectively. That can, hack into your private affairs and sort of to whom privacy restrictions don't apply. It changes from that to being a service provider like any other private service provider. So yeah, you either provide value to the citizens, or you're not funded, right? And you're replaced. So a lot of the excesses and waste that emanates from the government is potentially eliminated, right? And critically, I think it potentially defunds war, right? And I've written about this in my book, and I think, Seyfuddin has talked about it a lot. So has Lynn Alden. What does Bitcoin do with respect to violence? You look at the history of most wars have been funded through inflation. They temporarily go off the gold standard, or if they are on the fiat standard, they just print money to fund wars. And inflation is that silent, a surreptitious theft where you take money from the citizens without their knowledge, as opposed to overt taxation, which they're going to object to. They're going to pick up pitchforks and they're going to vote you out of power. But if you just inflate the currency, nobody really understands what's going on. Nobody realizes it. So maybe there's less war. Maybe there's less conflict. So that could be another aspect of a government on a Bitcoin standard.
I think I really do hope so, and I strongly believe the Bitcoin one of the implications that the Bitcoin adoption will have is separating money from state. Like, this is probably the biggest implication actually that Bitcoin will have in the world. Now,
but on that point though, gold is also a separation of money and state, right? So you got to acknowledge that. Bitcoin is not the only separation of money and state. A gold standard is the separation of money and state, but it's been tried before and it's failed because the government can always confiscate your gold. It can always censor transactions. It can always do all these things. And that's where you get to Bitcoin. But the separation of money and state per se can be achieved with gold.
But then the question is like, do you think that Bitcoin will fail at the same point when you see now all the people having Bitcoin at the exchanges and ETFs and giving it to Treasury companies to get like yield from stretch and like all of those different things that we're seeing now?
Maybe. It kind of defeats the purpose. I mean, I work quite extensively in the Bitcoin Treasury company space. But still, I would never advocate that people sell all their Bitcoin and move it to Treasury company. I think it should be a small, maybe a portion of your exposure. Because you lose all those benefits that we just talked about, unconfiscatability, censorship resistance, and permissionlessness, completely lost, if you're in that space. But I think it's okay as a on-ramp into the space. I think, many people who would have never touched Bitcoin are IBIT holders, ETF holders, because it's just in their brokerage account anyway. They just kind of move a little money over, and now they have some Bitcoin exposure, as opposed to having to, open an exchange, a crypto exchange account and fund it and all of that, right? So I think it helps as an on-ramp. I think it's useful, but yeah, you definitely. But the thing is, you have the option, right? I mean, before it's too late, hopefully you can see the writing on the wall, and you can sell your MSTR or your IBIT or whatever, and swap it into actual Bitcoin, right? Before there's any real risk of confiscation. But maybe in a worst case scenario, definitely, I'm sure there will be a lot of people who get caught out.
Are you shocked by how politicians and even president and governments, especially in the US, but actually also around the world here and there, are actually embracing Bitcoin? Is this kind of they don't see the danger in it, or they want to keep Bitcoin close to them? Or is it just like they see it as like a small industry? They're like, we get some votes from the Bitcoin industry?
I think other than El Salvador, I can't think of a single country that says they're pro-Bitcoin that actually understands Bitcoin or understands its implications. I think they are doing it as because it's seen as technology friendly, right? They want to be seen as very technology, forward-footed, like front-leaning kind of thing. So in order to attract investment, in order to attract wealthy immigrants or whatever, in order to attract capital, and obviously also to get votes, right? They see that it's very popular. You're going to just automatically get this whole voting block if you're seen as pro-crypto. And so I think that's what is driving them. I don't really think that they truly understand how the separation of money and state will impact what it means to be in politics and to be in government. But look, at the end of the day, politicians, people in government, all government bureaucrats, they're all people like you and I. It's not like they are some kind of other alien species or something, right? They are regular people. They go home every day. They have their own problems. They experience inflation just like everybody else. They experience all the problems just like everybody else. So, at some point, they will understand that it's not like they are, disempowering themselves. They are helping everybody by moving away from, this discretionary fiat money to a hard money standard. It helps everyone, all humans.
It's I always come back when we talk about this topic on the Trojan horse analogy, because I think it's just like such an amazing thing. It's stressed as a gift against inflation, banking the unbanked and all of that, but then inside it's like it's ripping the power away from the states to control the money. And because you said like the government is just a group of people that have the same problems with inflation, have the same problems that they see, and also they want to have votes, and they see like a Bitcoiner group growing. So I love that analogy just because of that.
Yeah, the Trojan horse is a great analogy, and I think you'll find. I mean, that is actually part of the whole Bitcoin, architecture. I think it co-opts people in, right, and then you have no choice but to support it. You sort of you buy some, and then now you're invested in it. So you need to invest in its security, right? If you find hash rate dropping, then you need to do something about it. You need to go out and buy a few ASIC machines and mine it, right? You need to contribute in that way. You need to fund, developers, if sort of to address quantum risk and so on. So because your bags are in Bitcoin, right? So it creates that incentive structure, and even politicians, many governments, and so on. Maybe they initially start backing it for other reasons, but then they find that they've now committed, they've gone too far, and they can't turn back, because if they did, then they stand to lose. Bitcoin's going to crash, and they're going to lose a lot of money. And so they keep supporting it, and they keep going further down the path. So it's all part of the architecture. I mean, if you want something truly decentralized, you need that delicate framework of incentives and checks and balances within the system for it to work, and it works beautifully.
I was, before I got into Bitcoin, I was into stocks. I really tried to make a shit ton of money and tried to have this like number crop technology thing. I was just getting out of school and just starting my first job, and I invested my money since I'm 18 years old, and since 21, 22 years old, I'm fully into Bitcoin. But before I was into Bitcoin, those 3-4 years, I was trying really hard to just like make a lot of money. That was my only goal. And then I found Bitcoin, and the pure goal with Bitcoin in the beginning was also make a lot of money. I put $5,000 in there and make $100,000 out of it. And over time, I researched about Bitcoin more. I watched a podcast, and now I look back, and somehow I'm so passionate now about self-custody, running your own node, but also about privacy more, about having my own kind of freedom in my own world. The point I'm trying to make here is Bitcoin kind of transformed my greed into making me a freedom fighter. I mean, there's always like more to the story. Like I also went from like 21 to 27 years old. There's like it's a period where the brain and the body and all of it like has a lot of development also, and like I grew up in general also, and I also have the podcast and all of it. So there's more to the story than just Bitcoin itself. But would you say, is it fair to say that Bitcoin transforms greed into actually incentivizes people to work together and freedom and all the things that we actually like preaching in Bitcoin because of the incentive structure, and also because of the community that is formed around Bitcoin?
Yeah, totally. Isn't there the meme? You come for the NGU, stay for the revolution, or something like that, right? Yeah, I mean, greed is an incredibly powerful, emotion, and Bitcoin channels that, and I think that has been the biggest reason it's gone from a cent to $126,000 and currently around $90,000, right? I mean, it's never been anything in history that has done something like that, and a lot of that is driven by greed. But greed is also, I mean, all the peaks and troughs and the cycles are all functions of greed, right? You have that blow off top, and then everyone panic sells, and then you crash, and then a few of the true believers remain. All the other tourists, they leave, and then you get greedy again, and the blow off tops are usually a function of greed. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that is the fact that Bitcoin is an ideological movement. There have been thousands, maybe millions of ideological movements through history, right? But you've never been able to point to a number and say, look, this is why I was right about my ideology from 10 years ago, right? But now you can actually say, I was right, my ideology was right, and you were wrong, and the numbers prove it, right? I bought Bitcoin when it was $700 in 2017, and now it's $80,000. I was right, and you were wrong, right? That's so powerful, right? And I think that is as an ideological movement, that's absolutely central and invaluable to Bitcoin's story. It's being able to leverage that human greed, but yeah, it's also important to be greedy at the right time. You should be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy, right? So I think, interestingly, we're at a point where it might be advisable to be greedy when others are fearful, but it's crazy that it's still, the price is at $90,000 when the fear greed index is at extreme fear right now, right? That says so much, and the sentiment right now is very similar to when Bitcoin was at $16,000. I mean, you and I were around, and I think it's very similar, maybe even worse in some respects.
It's really crazy. I mean, we are up almost 3 times, so like 160% over the last 5 years, and
But that's looking at peaks, right? That's looking at the peak. I mean, if you take prices at the FTX crash, during that period, Bitcoin was at $16,000 for months, between $16,000 and $20,000, right? So we are 5x or more up from then. And sentiment is rock bottom right now.
Actually, if you zoom out even a little bit further and you take 6 years, so January 2020 to right now, we are up 11x, which is a crazy to make that kind of return in about 6 years time. Like, nobody does it in any other asset.
Yeah, absolutely. And you compare that to gold and silver, and it's vastly outperformed, right? So it all depends on your time horizon. It depends on your window. But some people choose. I mean, Bitcoin was at an all-time high, 3 months ago or something, or 3.5 months ago, and but people are, they always come out of the woodwork, right? If just a few weeks go by without Bitcoin making an all-time high or something, you have people just appearing out of nowhere saying it's dead and it's failed and all of that. But we've seen this before. We've seen this over and over and over again. So there's nothing new here.
Yeah, I tried to find it, but there's an amazing chart that shows that, like Bitcoin has outperformed gold since like 15 years. And then there's like those 1.5 years where gold is a little bit better than Bitcoin. It's crazy. I mean, there's always periods,
imagine waiting. Yeah, these guys have been waiting for 20 years or more for a rally, okay? And they finally got it. And you can't wait. Like 3 months has got you panicking so badly. It's insane, It's just surreal.
People really put a lot of presence, a lot of importance to the last few days and months, and forget what they have achieved over the last 5 to 10 years. It's astronomical. I mean, even I think in our own lives, we always compare ourselves kind of to what we have been to like the last few months, and if there's like a down period, we feel really bad. But then you look back at your development over the last 10 years and you're like, wow, I've come so far the last 10 years, but nobody does that. People always compare them, it's so recent.
It's called Recency bias. So regency bias is, when you, exactly what you said, you tend, the human psychology tends to overweight recent events, and underweight historical events, even if the historical events have occupied a much longer duration than the more recent events. Yeah.
What is actually the most interesting historical comparison that you see in Bitcoin? Because we always try to find something in history that relates to what is currently going on, and you can never find an exact thing, but you can find something that like kind of rhymes with the thing that we are seeing with Bitcoin now.
I don't think there's ever been anything like it, right? I mean, that's the greatest thing about it. It is so different, so revolutionary, and you can't really, I mean, people analogize the separation of money and church and state, which is debatable. I mean, you can't really pinpoint. I think it's basically the U.S. Constitution, which I forget which amendment, but it I think Thomas Jefferson says erect a wall of separation between money and state, and that was the separation of, so the government wasn't allowed to basically institute any form of religion, any form of state, right? That was the formal separation of money and state. It was a huge thing because historically, you go back to thousands of years, Hammurabi and the Egyptian pharaohs and so on, they claimed to derive their authority directly from the gods. And so, religion and authority and the state were inseparably intertwined. And they used it as a means of control, right? Religion and divine authority was used as a means of controlling people. And then the moment that was dismantled, it was a great, powerful moment for the advancement of humanity, right? And the decentralization of power away from religion. The separation of money and state is arguably an even more powerful event in history, right? So, I mean, it solves a problem that goes right back to, I don't know, the caveman era, when the strongest, most powerful hunter-gatherers hoarded all the produce, or the invaded and stole other people's food and other commodities. And now you have an unconfiscable asset which you can just memorize and travel around with in your mind, right? Which is incredibly powerful, uncensorable. So yeah, it's potentially the most pivotal invention ever, and it's nothing to compare it with.
I think we don't talk enough about this very nature, this non-physical nature of Bitcoin, that you just can't steal it if the other person doesn't want to give it to you. You can still like shoot the other person, you can still like endanger him and harm him, but you no longer have the incentive to do it, because it's easier to provide value to him to get his money than just like corrupt him and get his money. If it's something physical like a bar of gold, or like even like a house that the government also can take it from you, you can just say, hey, give it to me or I'll shoot you. And if he shoots you, you get it anyways. And with Bitcoin, it's like, if you only know how to get to your Bitcoin, he can still shoot you, but like the Bitcoin are also gone at this very nature. And this really is this non-physical nature is like really cool.
Yeah. I mean, but I don't know how encouraging that is. I mean, you can still be tortured for your Bitcoin. You're sort of forced to, without keeping you on the edge of death until you hand over your keys. No, but the solution to that is just your good privacy practices, right? You can much more easily keep the fact that you have, your wealth stored in Bitcoin secret than you can keep the fact that you have bars of gold under your bed or in a bank or a vault somewhere, or money in a bank account, which you literally have to routinely disclose all over the place, right? So yeah, good privacy practices combined with good key storage, custody, self-custody solutions like multi-custody or sharding your keys and storing them in different parts of the world or whatever. It's just exponentially easier. It's not even comparable, right? But the means with which you can safeguard your physical commodities or your fiat currency in bank accounts, and the means of having a perfect security framework for your Bitcoin.
It's a totally like it's not perfect, and it does not provide physical security for you, but it gives you leverage, and there's like two different kinds of leverage. I feel like always with self-custody, there's the multi-signature leverage, and then there's the time lock leverage. So you can obviously, for example, have something liquid always. You need something liquid, like you should have something that you can access at some point, but why not time lock things over like even a few months or like half a year or something like that, where like I just don't need that right now. Or like if someone comes to you and says like, oh, give me your money, I'm like, yeah, you can have this like very small amount of money. If you want more money, we have to get into a plane. Like it's a whole different ball game all of a sudden, like coming to a house and just like give me your money versus I'll take you on a plane, or like I'll kidnap someone and you go on a plane. Like it's a whole different ball game. And then it's like, okay, yeah, but actually, like if you want all of it, you have to wait and kidnap me for like a year. It's like it just like becomes a lot bigger. The friction to get to your Bitcoin just becomes so much harder.
Yeah. Or you just have a multi-sig where one of the keys, it's 2 of 3 and one of the or 2 of the 3 or whatever, like, but one of the keys is in this high security entity, like, where you have to go through physical verification and authentication through like guarded doors and everything into a literal building that's got armed guards there. And that's the only way you can get the second signature in the multi-sig, right? In that way, it's no different from having your money at HSBC Bank or Citibank or JP Morgan or something like that. I mean, it's the same, right? In fact, it's more secure. So it is better than fiat in a bank in those respects, and it's also better than gold under your mattress in those. So it is the best of both worlds. You can have the exact or far superior security than having fiat at JP Morgan Bank, and far better security than having it privately in a treasure chest in your backyard. So it is infinitely better than both.
A few more things. One more that I'm curious about, also with the states and separation of money and state. What is the point that Bitcoin actually threatens the state in itself, the power they have? Is there a point that you look at, like Bitcoin has to reach that level, or there's like a trigger point that you see, or what will or maybe differently ask, is there like an event or something that happens that we know, okay, now it's kind of obvious that the state no longer has the control over the money and Bitcoin is now like a dominant thing? Because obviously now we are not yet there.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's a big event like that. I think it's gradual progress. And it's the gradual it's the non-violent defunding of the state. And that is the greatest power. But you don't need to pick up pitchforks and go and wage a revolution, and you don't need a guillotine, and you don't need any of that, right? You just peacefully, voluntarily move your money from within whatever is within the state's purview, outside of it, into this unconfiscatable, uncensorable realm. And that's the beauty of it. and you can do that anytime you want, and it's voluntary and it's non-violent. So I hope it is a gradual process, the gradual migration of value, the migration of money away from those centralized hands in the state into this digital dematerialized realm, rather than it being some big, event or breaking point where people, I don't know, are killed and there's wars and a revolution and all of that. I'd rather have a gradual progression to the end game.
Yeah, this peaceful revolution is huge. I want to talk about treasury companies also before we get to the end routine of the podcast. A little bit we already touched on them, but how do you see treasury companies right now? How good are they for Bitcoin, and what are kind of the role of treasury companies in the Bitcoin ecosystem as of now?
Yeah, like I said, look, I said that I think, as we discussed, the negative of all of this is that when you buy shares of a Bitcoin treasury company, you're not availing of any of the true benefits of Bitcoin, like self-custody and so on. And so that is a negative, and so it gets criticized a lot. And it's also much more volatile. It's compared to actual Bitcoin. But the flip side of that, of course, as Adam Back said, is that I think treasury companies are now acting as shock absorbers. So Bitcoin, they're stripping off a lot of the volatility from Bitcoin because they take a lot of that initial sell pressure or buy pressure. And so Bitcoin moves much more gradually. But look, I think they are part of the adoption story. I think there's no such thing as bad. They say there's no such thing as bad publicity. There's no such thing as bad adoption. So it's all good. Everything is good for Bitcoin. I think corporations adopting Bitcoin was always part of the story. Like, I mean, the famous Hal Finney quote from 2011 or so, where he talks about Bitcoin banks, right? And he didn't see that as antithetical to the Bitcoin story. I don't see it as antithetical. So I think it's part of the adoption story. And as Michael Saylor said, recently in the What Bitcoin Did podcast, Bitcoin helps every business, and there's so many thousands of ways in which Bitcoin can improve different businesses, and so every business will be better for it. So and in a hyper Bitcoinized world, hopefully every business has it as part of their corporate treasury. So it's all good. It's all part of that adoption path, the adoption arc. But and I think in terms of should a company be cash flow positive and profitable, in order to adopt a Bitcoin treasury, or if it's loss making, I think everything is good. Adopting Bitcoin is always going to be good for you in some way. It's usually, if you're a highly profitable company, if you're Apple or Google or something, you're going to be the last ones to adopt Bitcoin because you don't need it. It's usually the people who are struggling in some way who are the first adopters, right? So you can't fault them just because they are loss making or something of the sort. But definitely, I think the profitable ones are in a much better position. The cash flow positive ones are in a much better position, particularly like in the current environment where there's so much negative sentiment. Everything is trading at either 1 mNAV or below 1, maybe slightly above, just a couple of the Bitcoin treasury companies. So in this kind of environment, having a positive P&L and cash flow, and showing that you can accrete Bitcoin on the balance sheet, even basically in any environment, is a really, really strong story. So I work with XCE, the UK company. I think you might have spoken to Scott Ellum. They're a profitable company. They have all these synergies with human resources, as well as helping the adoption of Bitcoin, and also growing a Bitcoin treasury, in parallel, and they're profitable as well. So I think, there's some really good stories like that. So you should be, if you're looking for companies in the space, I think you should be discerning, and it does help if the company is profitable.
I found it fascinating to watch Saylor and Danny talk about that. And honestly, I agree with Saylor a lot. I don't know what the problem is with a publicly traded company adopting Bitcoin. I obviously wouldn't buy it if it's a bad business model, that. Like that's a whole separate thing. And but like there is nothing wrong with a company adopting Bitcoin. Isn't that what we want? That individuals, companies, institutions, and governments all embrace Bitcoin. It's an absolute no-brainer for me. So that whole discussion was so weird to watch for me, because it's like, you cannot really say anything against, like, it's good for Bitcoin if companies buy it. It's the same thing of like, I think Saylor also brought that point up. It's like, do we want a person that is unemployed and currently has to live off its savings not to buy Bitcoin?
I think Danny got a lot of flack for that, and I do think that some of it was maybe unjustified. So I'll tell you the angle I think that he was coming at, which is also arguable. It's not wrong. So he's coming at it from the perspective of shareholders, right? I mean, if you're a private company and you add Bitcoin to the balance sheet, I don't think anyone has a problem with that. Like, nobody can criticize that. It's your business, you do it. But if you're selling a narrative to shareholders, the public in particular, doing a public offering and telling shareholders that, oh, it's going to go up to 10x MNAV or 50x MNAV, and you're selling stock when it's 50 MNAV, and then crashes to 0.5 MNAV, right? You've hurt a lot of shareholders. You've hurt a lot of Bitcoiners, right, who bought into the Bitcoin story. So I think he was coming at it. There's two angles here. There's the company's angle who want to adopt Bitcoin, and I think Saylor was arguing for the company, but Danny was arguing for the shareholders, particularly the retail shareholders who have invested in these companies. But I think Saylor's point to that is that do your own due diligence. That's your fault. If you bought it at 50x MNAV and now it's 0.5 MNAV, you've got only yourself to blame for that, right? And if you put all your money in that company, then you have only yourself to blame for that. So I don't think it was a clear cut, like the way it was made out. Like he was, I can understand what Danny was saying in a way, but I think, it didn't really come across, or it wasn't argued in the best way, I think.
It was great content. I think it was very entertaining to watch. But yeah, my takeaway was like, companies buying Bitcoin is good. Investing in a company that sells a bullshit narrative is bad. Like it's probably not a good idea to invest in companies that are unprofitable, have no thing. Like, just like, I think the main reason why Bitcoiners might be saucy about that is they see that there's a equity that takes away of the buying power that maybe otherwise would have bought Bitcoin. I think that might just be the main reason. And
you contribute to the volatility as well. I mean, you contribute when you buy something at those valuations, and then it crashes, and then Bitcoin like everything goes haywire, right? And there's some anger at companies the tiny, loss-making companies that did public offers to retail at those kind of valuations, and now have basically hurt retail investors. So, I mean, who is to blame for that is I think that's arguable, but that I think is the counter narrative.
When we talk about treasury companies, I think we have to talk about the mother god of all treasury companies, as strategy. Having now, I think the last time I checked, over 700,000 Bitcoin. surprised me how well they execute the story of buying Bitcoin, how low the debt is actually, and how amazing the preferred stocks work currently. I had Sailor on my just to have some background. I had Sailor on my podcast. I was at this 100K party, and I had probably like 30 or 40 people on it were very bullish on strategy, and I never bought it. Like never. Until about like the last 1-2 months. Because I really was like, okay, I have to look into this deeply. And all the notions that I had about strategy were just wrong. It's like, oh, it's like over leveraged. No, it's not. Like all the things that I thought, but it was just not true what I thought about strategy. And also the valuation, I think now is like super low with like a 1.06 0.07 or something like that, like a 6-7% premium for like an amplified Bitcoin position. And then Stretch, I think I would not have invested without Stretch. Like Stretch is the thing that made me at least buy some of strategy. I had like a very small position, like 1-2% maybe of the whole thing. But like it is so interesting for me that I can't not buy it at this point. How do you think about strategy, and what is kind of like your story with like the amplified Bitcoin story at strategy?
I think you're right. It's I think 15% debt to equity. That is just minuscule. That's nothing. You look at the public, equities context. They are not leveraged at all. They are like it's almost negligible leverage. But yet people will say that. I think the move to pref shares as a funding mechanism for adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet is absolutely genius. It really comes down to if they issue prefs at 10% dividends, 10 or 11% dividend rate. It comes down to a simple point. You're just betting that Bitcoin's CAGR, average growth rate into the future will be at least 11% per annum. And you're just betting that the adoption will continue and more people will be willing to buy, the shares to fund those pref shares, right? And of course, they have other means of generating income as well. I am extremely bullish about that. I think it's a simple thing. Like if you're bullish on Bitcoin adoption, you have to be bullish on strategy. But there are other companies MetaPlanet, I think, generated something like $50 million in income simply by their put option writing strategy. So they raise money, let's say $1 billion or whatever, but they don't buy Bitcoin immediately. They write put options struck at par, right? And they receive premiums from that. So that's an income for them. If Bitcoin price falls, then they lose money. It's kind of technically they're out of the money on the put, but they are buying Bitcoin cheaper, so they get more Bitcoin using the $1 billion cash that they got, right? And if Bitcoin goes up, then their put option it expires worthless. They don't. So it's kind of a win-win situation, and they've proven it now. They've made, I think, over $50 million in income. So all the companies try a strategy, or any other company that has a lot of Bitcoin in the balance sheet, they're just going to use. This is just one of those derivative strategies where you can generate income off of your Bitcoin Treasury stack. So there's all of that. So there's so much you can do, and it's so exciting. Yeah. So I'm very, very bullish on that space.
Yeah, I approached treasury companies how I approached cryptocurrencies. I started with Bitcoin, the biggest one, and then I worked my way down. Then I went into Ethereum and other things, and then at some point I realized, it's Bitcoin only. I tend to do the same thing now with treasury companies also. I'm curious where I end up, but at this point, it's just only focused, and I'm still not fully there. Like I'm still have to do some research with strategy. I'm really looking forward. I think they have very soon, when this is coming out, maybe it's already has been there, the earnings call for Q4 of 2025. So yeah, I think I'm curious how I will look at the other treasury companies once I'm fully done with strategy. But what I hear is from people that I listen to now is MetaPlanet, and also I think, what is it called, Strive, I think also was an interesting one of people. And yeah, I had Scott Elm also from your company on, was also fun, because I know Scott already since longer now, because he has been on the podcast now already also twice. So that there's like a lot of life into the space. And people tend to focus on the treasury companies that are unprofitable and trying to sell a shit narrative, instead of like focusing on like the good ones that actually produce something good or profitable and have some interesting mechanism. I think that I'm always someone that tries to focus on the positive, not on the negative.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's some great companies out there. Yeah.
Really cool. Then thank you so much already for being on and being a guest on the podcast again. I think your second time on the show. Before I let you go, oh wait, I almost forgot the end routine. We have an end routine in the podcast, as you might know, where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. It's a very interesting one, not about Bitcoin at all. The question is, what is stopping you from following Jesus right now?
Jesus.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Sure, I follow him. I can sort of, I'm happy with all religions and gods. So yeah. Curious who that guest was, but
Pasta Coin from the guy that wrote, I think, the Bible and Bitcoin. I think this was the book that he wrote, and I think he wrote a second one also around that. But it was really fun. About the connection between God, the Bible, and Bitcoin, and he talked about how he now saw a lot of people that were not into Christianity and found Christianity with Bitcoin, which seems to be a small niche kind of group within Bitcoin, which is fascinating for me that there is a group like that.
Oh yeah. There is there's that book, right, that Jimmy Song wrote, Thank God for Bitcoin or something like that. So it's been around. The association, the theological aspect of Bitcoin has been around for many years now.
It's crazy for me that there is something like that, because if you think about a money, like if you think about it from first principles, there's like a new money token on the internet, and you cannot manipulate it in all the properties, and then like people adopt that and get into a religion. I'm like, how? That does not make any sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, really cool. Thank you so much, Vijay, for being on the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you?
My Twitter handle is Vijay Selvam, so that's probably the best place to reach me. But yeah, thank you for having me on, and really enjoyed the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on, and also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back. The first thing that every Bitcoiner does, and the most important activity that every Bitcoiner keeps on doing, is buying Bitcoin. And I personally use Relai to buy and sometimes also spend or sell my Bitcoin. And there are two main reasons why I do so. The first one is it's Bitcoin only. They do not do any shit coins. They do not do any cryptos, any stocks, or anything else. This is a tool, an app that is fully focused only and solely on Bitcoin. The second one is self-custody. They give you the keys to your Bitcoin the moment you buy them. You never give them the control over your Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust them because you can verify that you and only you have the keys to your Bitcoin. There's no third-party risk. There's no freezing of your assets. There's no rug pulling. There's nothing of that. Download Relai, the app, on your phone, or go to relay.app on your browser and use code Robin to save fees and get cheaper Bitcoin. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC-free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.